They didn't hurt you by accident. They knew exactly what they were doing, and the truth is, they expected you to break. They expected tears. They expected rage. They expected you to chase closure. Silence and indifference remove emotional control, because human psychology is deeply wired to seek reaction, validation, and emotional feedback. When someone hurts you, they often expect a response: anger, sadness, confrontation, or explanation. These reactions confirm that they still matter in your emotional world. Psychology shows that attention, even negative attention, acts as reinforcement. It tells the other person that they still have influence over your thoughts and feelings. Silence breaks this reinforcement loop. When there is no reaction, the brain of the person who caused harm is left without feedback, and uncertainty begins to replace confidence. Indifference is not emotional numbness. It is emotional detachment. Detachment signals that the person no longer has access to your inner world. From a psychological perspective, loss of access triggers discomfort because the human ego depends on relevance. When relevance disappears, the mind starts searching for meaning. Questions arise: did I lose control? Did I go too far? Why don't they react anymore? This internal questioning creates cognitive tension. Unlike confrontation, which allows justification and defense, silence offers no emotional data to argue against. Neuroscience explains that social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. When you stop reacting, the other person experiences a subtle form of rejection. Indifference communicates that their actions failed to affect your self-worth. This is powerful because emotional control depends on predictability. If someone can predict your reaction, they can manipulate it. Silence removes predictability. The nervous system of the manipulator no longer knows how to regain influence, leading to psychological unease. Another reason silence is powerful is because it shifts the power dynamic. Reacting places you in a defensive position, while silence places you in control. Control in psychology is linked to autonomy and emotional regulation. When you regulate your emotions instead of expressing them impulsively, you reclaim authority over your internal state. This self-regulation weakens the emotional bond that pain tries to create. Trauma bonds often survive through repeated emotional exchanges, even negative ones. Silence disrupts this cycle. Indifference also protects the mind from rumination. Emotional reactions keep the brain stuck in replay mode, continuously revisiting the hurt. By choosing silence, you reduce cognitive load and allow the mind to redirect energy towards stability. Over time, emotional distance rewires neural associations connected to the person who caused harm. The emotional charge fades, not because the memory disappears, but because the brain no longer assigns it importance. Psychologically, people who seek control through harm rely on emotional access as proof of power. When that access is denied, they are forced to face themselves without reflection from you. This absence can be more unsettling than confrontation because it offers no closure, no reassurance, and no validation. Silence becomes a mirror they cannot look into, and indifference becomes the boundary they cannot cross. Personal growth becomes the most powerful psychological revenge because it shifts the focus away from the person who caused harm and redirects it toward self-evolution. When someone hurts you, the natural instinct is to seek justice, explanation, or emotional resolution. Psychology shows that this instinct keeps the injured person mentally tied to the source of pain. Growth breaks this attachment. It transforms emotional energy into progress, which weakens the psychological grip of the past. Instead of being defined by what happened, the individual begins to be defined by what they become. Growth alters identity, and identity change is one of the most disruptive forces in human psychology. When you improve your mindset, boundaries, discipline, and self-respect, you are no longer the same person who was accessible to harm. This creates a psychological gap between your past and present self. The person who hurt you no longer understands you, and that loss of familiarity reduces their sense of relevance. Relevance is a core human need, and when it disappears, it triggers internal discomfort and reflection. From a cognitive perspective, growth introduces self-efficacy, the belief that you can influence your own outcomes. Trauma often damages this belief, making people feel powerless. When you rebuild your life through learning, discipline, and emotional maturity, the brain registers evidence of strength. This evidence rewires neural pathways associated with helplessness into pathways associated with control. The emotional narrative changes from victimhood to agency, which weakens resentment and the desire for external validation. Personal growth also restructures boundaries. Psychology shows that people who hurt others often exploit emotional openness or lack of self-definition. Growth sharpens awareness of personal limits. You begin to recognize red flags earlier, communicate less, and observe more. This reduces vulnerability to manipulation. The person who once had access to your emotions no longer has a point of entry. Not because you are closed, because you are selective. Selectivity is a sign of high self-worth. Another psychological impact of growth is the shift from reactive living to intentional living. Reactive individuals respond to external triggers, while intentional individuals act based on internal values. This shift changes how the nervous system processes stress. Instead of spikes of emotional response, there is calm evaluation. Calmness is often misinterpreted as weakness. In psychology, it is associated with emotional intelligence and resilience. This calm presence unsettles those who once relied on provoking reactions. Growth also removes the need for comparison. When you measure progress against your own standards, instead of someone else's behavior, resentment loses its function. The mind no longer seeks revenge because it no longer needs validation. Achievement, inner stability, and self-respect replace the desire to be seen or acknowledged by the person who caused pain. Their opinion becomes psychologically irrelevant, as your sense of value becomes internally generated. As growth continues, the memory of the hurt changes meaning. It becomes a reference point rather than a wound. The experience is no longer stored as unresolved trauma, but as information that shaped discernment and strength. This reframing alters emotional memory, reducing its intensity. The person who caused harm becomes a footnote in a larger story of development, while your focus remains on expansion, clarity, and self-mastery. In the end, psychology makes one truth clear: the moment you stop reacting and start evolving, control returns to you. Silence severs emotional access, and growth replaces pain with power. What once felt like damage becomes direction, and what was meant to weaken you becomes the foundation of your strength. The people who tried to hurt you fade into irrelevance, not because you defeated them, but because you outgrew the version of yourself they could reach. This is not revenge driven by anger, by self-respect, awareness, and inner authority. The kind of revenge that doesn't announce itself, doesn't seek validation, and never needs to look back.